Scooby-Doo is one of the most successful cartoon characters ever created. Ever since it first appeared on TV back in 1969, it's managed to stay on the air with some kind of new revival every single decade after the franchise was created. Scooby-Doo has managed to become one of the most iconic and globally recognizable cartoons of all time, and it's no surprise that the property has been adapted into movies multiple times in order to attempt to capture the appeal and spirit of the original animated series, movies that have seen varying degrees of success and quality. In all these years, Warner has made a lot of completely hand-drawn animated movies. They've made completely CGI animated movies, and they've also made live-action movies with CGI animated character models for Scooby-Doo and some of the film's monsters. And while all of these movies have their positive and negative aspects to them, I think that there's one very specific idea for a Scooby-Doo movie that Warner has still never done, and if done right, I sincerely believe it could be the single best Scooby-Doo movie that they could possibly do. I want Warner Brothers to make a Who Framed Roger Rabbit style Scooby-Doo movie, set in a live-action world with real actors, but with the Mystery Gang and Scooby-Doo being 2D animated characters. I just absolutely love that visual style for a movie. And I've always and will always yearn for a new film that manages to capture some of the brilliant creativity and charm that made Roger Rabbit such a classic. And what's kind of funny about this idea is that we actually have already seen a 2D animated Scooby-Doo in a real-world live-action setting like in Roger Rabbit. Back in 1999, Cartoon Network created a short 20-minute special called the Scooby-Doo Project, which was broken up into smaller segments that aired on commercial breaks during a Halloween special on the channel that year. And what's cool about this is that the special is actually a parody of the Blair Witch Project, which is a found footage horror movie that was actually insanely popular when it originally premiered, and it started a huge wave of found footage horror films in its wake, preparing the landscape for franchises like Paranormal Activity. And despite the Scooby-Doo Project being obviously played for laughs and being comedic, you'd actually be surprised with how they were willing to lean into the horror aspect of Scooby-Doo, since the special's entire premise is that the police is searching for the Mystery Gang after they've been lost in a forest for days, and the only evidence left behind was some footage that they captured while they were lost, which the police later found. And the special could actually get somewhat scary and tense in some scenes as the Mystery Gang start fighting with each other after getting lost, and they slowly start to legitimately lose their minds.
Scooby! Scooby-Doo! Scooby! Scooby-Doo! Where are you? Over here!
Oh. I think that one of the greatest things that any Scooby-Doo story can do is lean into horror elements and themes. Works like Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island and the 2010s Mystery Incorporated animated series proved that some of the best stories from the franchise come from directly playing into horror. Even when we look at the original 1969 Hanna-Barbera cartoon, the use of horror tropes and iconography really did elevate the entire show's quality. A lot of the show's background art was fantastic, filled with atmosphere and dread that added some light tension appropriate for children, and this was all intentional, given that the show's creators were directly taking inspiration from the spooky horror films of the era. Scooby-Doo was kind of like Courage the Cowardly Dog from the time, in the sense that it was a mainly comedy show that combined some horror elements which were sometimes played straight with a sincere intention to leave kids kinda scared and uneasy, all while maintaining an overall lighthearted tone. Also, Velma. Yeah, I know it sucks. It really, really sucks. But I honestly think that one of the few positives it has going for it are its visuals, since its animation is pretty good and its art style plays really well with the colors and shadows in some specific scenes to highlight the show's horror elements. And whenever the series gets into that level of detail, it's honestly pretty great visually. It's just a shame that the rest of the show sucks ass. Horror is also another great way of adding a slightly more mature feel to a Scooby-Doo project. Ever since it was created basically, there's always been a fascination with looking at Scooby-Doo from an adult's perspective. But most times this is done, it's only used to do crude sex jokes and weed jokes. Like basically all of Velma, or the original idea for James Gunn's live-action Scooby-Doo movie. But another way they can put an adult spin on Scooby-Doo is by focusing on horror in a sincerely frightening way. And just to clarify, I don't think that Scooby-Doo is at its best when it's made specifically for an adult audience. I think that the best we've ever seen from Scooby-Doo is when they conceptualize stories that respect the franchise's legacy by subverting some common expectations and tropes while remaining true to the universal appeal of the original concept, making it enjoyable for all demographics. Stuff like Zombie Island, Mystery Incorporated, and the Scooby-Doo Project. I really can't stress enough just how well they managed to do something new and subversive with Scooby-Doo in just a 20-minute special. The Scooby-Doo Project is a much better quote-unquote adult Scooby-Doo than Velma, without having to be overly crass, distasteful, or over the top. I honestly don't even think that Scooby-Doo should ever go full R-rated, because more often than not, they'll simply rely too much on unfunny sex jokes or gratuitous violence. You know, exactly how Velma did. I'd much rather see a Scooby-Doo that finds a way to appeal to both adults and younger audiences by clever uses of horror and subverting the common tropes of the Scooby-Doo franchise in creative new ways. And just to clarify, when I say that I'd like to see a full-length film that's similar to the Scooby-Doo Project, I don't mean that I want to see a found-footage Scooby-Doo movie. That was a neat concept for a 20-minute Blair Witch parody, but I think that the most interesting ideas from the special were the smart use of horror throughout the story and using the 2D live-action hybrid art style in the same vein as Roger Rabbit, which actually wouldn't be the last time that we would see Scooby-Doo in this style. Even though they've never made my dream Roger Rabbit style Scooby-Doo movie, there was a brief cameo scene in Looney Tunes Back in Action, another movie that goes for a Roger Rabbit style 2D live-action hybrid starring Brendan Fraser alongside Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, where we can see for a moment Shaggy and Scooby criticizing Matthew Lillard for his performance in the 2002 live-action Scooby-Doo movie. Years later, in 2021, there was also another special made for HBO Max called Scooby-Doo Where Are You Now?, a behind-the-scenes style fake documentary where they interview the Mystery Gang years later and they reflect on the history of Scooby-Doo as a franchise. This special is pretty entertaining, but another fun thing about it is that within the special's world, they basically treat Scooby and the Mystery Gang as if they were actors or performers within that world. In their Looney Tunes Back in Action cameo, they were also meant to be actors, and this is something that sort of stems from Who Framed Roger Rabbit all the way back in 1988. In that film's world, they explain why there are animated characters living alongside real-life human beings by treating cartoon characters as an entire separate race of beings that are exclusively performers and entertainers, which is kinda heavy and dark when you think about it. But that's just another reason why Roger Rabbit is such a layered and well thought out movie, and almost every other movie in the same style as Roger Rabbit that has come out since, such as Looney Tunes Back in Action or Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, have also depicted the cartoon characters in their film's world as being actors or performers. And while that is a fun idea, I also like how the Scooby-Doo Project handled this by basically not handling it or addressing the subject at all. They never explain why the Mystery Gang and Scooby are cartoon characters living alongside flesh and blood human beings. And I think that's funnier, honestly. Just have a world where real-life people and literal cartoon characters coexist and just never explain it. Why? Because it's funny. And I know what some of you might be thinking. Why am I even talking about the next big budget Scooby-Doo movie? Especially when just last year in 2023, we were meant to see the release of Scoob Holiday Haunt, the prequel to 2020 Scoob, which was meant to release directly onto Max, but was actually cancelled by Warner Bros. Discovery, even though the movie was literally completely finished, much like what happened with Batgirl. During that same year, the company made the extremely controversial decision to shelve a number of movies that were already fully made or very close to completion and were set to release, such as Batgirl, Coyote v Acme, and Scoob Holiday Haunt, turning them into tax write-offs in order to save money. The entire situation is absolutely tragic and disgusting, really. It's a complete insult to the art form and to every single person that worked so hard to get these movies made. It's insanely disrespectful and a huge shame that we'll never get to see Holiday Haunt. The movie was apparently going to follow younger kid versions of the Mystery Gang, like in the flashback scene in Scoob, which was pretty much the best part of the film, and it had some great A Pup Named Scooby-Doo vibes. I was honestly looking forward to seeing Holiday Haunt, so it was really disappointing when David Zaslav and Warner Bros. Discovery shelved it and cancelled so many other projects. It really is an awful reality of having such beloved classic franchises be owned by a company that doesn't have a clear direction or business plan, and they make terrible decisions that negatively affected thousands of artists and fans alike. But beyond rightly criticizing them and speaking up about the issue, we can all at least take relief in knowing that Scooby-Doo is huge. Huge as in hugely, immensely popular. He's so popular, in fact, that even though the franchise might go through some turmoil and complications, eventually the situation will get better and we will see a new high-quality Scooby-Doo project that can stand among the other great incarnations of the series. So yeah, I hope that Warner Bros. Discovery one day eventually gets their shit together. And when they do finally get it together, I want them to make a live-action / 2D animated hybrid Scooby-Doo movie in the same style as Roger Rabbit. And if they do make it, hopefully they will also release it for people to actually see instead of shelving it. You know, that'd be neat.